What's up, Star Mindsets? Are you buried under mountains of paperwork? Have you ever felt like your office is more of a paper maze than a workspace? Before you resort to drastic measures like setting it all on fire, call Shred Safe because flamethrowers and paperwork, they don't really mix. Your DFW neighborhood paper shredding solution is Shred Safe. Link in the description or give them a call at 469-265-8142 with the promo code Dan's Hair is on Fire. Ain't that one promo code? But check them out, you guys, for real though, if you do need paper shredding needs, whether you're a large enterprise, think of a law office, doctor's office, handling important documents, maybe the CIA even. Check them out, give them a call. That's, once again, 469-265-8142.
Love over hate, I am. Whatever I create, I am. Bold, staying brave, I am. Patient, never waiting, I am. The face of motivation, I am. The words of inspiration, I am.
What's up, Star Mindsets? Yeah, check this out. The book is coming out in give it take two months. So I'm excited about that. It's been a dream of mine. If you've been a follower of the show since 2020, that's kind of what brought this whole thing together. The idea to have a book, and I still remember the conversation with Earl about, hey, well, why don't we do a podcast? Maybe that'd be a good way to remember what people said. And fast forward 4 years, the idea became a corporation officially in 2022, and it's taken me to places I would never have expected, especially meeting the people I've met through this, and whether that was people who were guests I had on the show as in podcast interviews, or whether it was externally, and people were impressed and decided to give me opportunities for a sponsorship or a speaking opportunity, or just reached out to want to work with us, as an intern or a video creator or somebody who just wanted to help us make more content, whatever the case may be. Or they were inspired to start a shop, or like start a company, or quit their job, whatever the case may be. I just never knew that it would take us to this point here in 2024, and I'm glad to announce that we are publishing our book with Penguin Random House. Yeah, Penguin Random House. They publish a lot of books. They're one of the best publishers in the world. We're working with their Southeast Asia branch in Singapore to really bring this dream to life. And ever since I was about 20 years old, I had the notion to write a book. And as you can see right here with the English degree in the back, let me see. You guys can see that? You can see that, right? Bachelor's of Arts in English. I got that about 7 years ago. And to finally have the opportunity to publish a book is monumental, and I'm not even fully grasping that. But I hope you guys been well. I hope you guys doing great stuff too. I'd love for you guys to check out the book once it's out. Check us out on our mailing list. That way we're going to give you just access to some behind the scenes of the book, and also just more exclusive content when it comes to, I guess, like mindsets and entrepreneurship. Also some special deals with some of the companies that have partnered with us. More to be announced there, but and I want to give a huge shout out to Shred Safe LLC. Shout out to Brian Yen, good homie of mine since back in the day, and he's got a shredding company. You should definitely check him out if you're in Dallas or even in Texas. They make your shredding problems disappear. But I'm excited to get into the show today. We spoke to Julia Enthoven. She's a founder of KAPWING, which is a startup that I'm coming in to learn about, and just realizing the impact that they have in video editing and social media and content creation, which is kind of the big thing in today's world. It was just great to really unpack how the company was created and also the moves that Julia took to, um, to get to where she is now, of course, but also to, you know, where the company is going. So, yeah, without further ado, here's the pod.
Julia, yeah, thank you for having the time today and reaching out. I'm glad that, you like the podcast and we had the opportunity to chat. I think that KAPWING's such a cool company. I think like with how many hours we spend on the phone on the Instagram and just getting stuck in, you know, warp wormhole. I don't know how you say that, but like just stuck in like the rabbit hole of a phone. Yeah, it's all because of video almost. So thanks for making the time today. If you're unfamiliar with Julia, she has a degree from Stanford. I've read that she's worked at Google. Her product's been used by the Ukraine government, and yeah, I think just so much to learn about Julia today. So Julia, thank you for making the time and great to talk to you.
Yeah, of course. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the podcast. And yeah, excited to share more about our journey.
For sure, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess I like to begin like with just talking to you about like where you grew up and like like um yeah, just what were you like as a kid and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm from Dallas originally, and Dallas is a very safe and kind of boring place to grow up, but a really wonderful place to be a kid. I have three brothers, and I think I always grew up like, roughhousing with them and learning from them. My dad was an entrepreneur. So when I was growing up, I could see from him sort of his explorations. He worked in sort of boring, quote unquote, like boring industries, like things that are more old school, like he worked in electricity, in rent, like used cars for a while, in laundromats. But rather than working in software, he was thinking about, hardware and sort of commercial industries. And because of that, I sort of always had this dream in the back of my mind around starting my own business. When I was 18, I came out to California to go to Stanford and have been here ever since.
That's cool. Yeah, yeah. Dallas, Texas. Um, do you do you like tech? How do you compare and contrast California or like the Bay Area with the lifestyle in Texas? Like, I've never been over there, but I have a good friend who's over there, so just curious like what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, California is just so naturally beautiful. It's amazing here. You're close to the beach, you're close to the mountains. The weather is incredible all year round. And that's so special. I think that beyond just that, the weather aspect, this is obviously a mecca for technology and for engineering. And so when I came out to college, I didn't think that I would study computer science. I didn't really have interest in it as a teenager. But I ended up sort of taking a computer science class because it was the thing to do at Stanford. 96% of freshmen or 96% of undergrads take at least one computer science class. And I loved it. I mean, it was so much more creative than I expected it to be, or than I had the impression that it was. And that was, an amazing experience that I don't think I would have had if I hadn't come out to California. So I think Texas, like I said, it's, a great place for a kid. It's really safe. You can just run around barefoot, in your streets. But it also has less natural beauty and less of sort of that like technology community around it. So it was really special to come out here. And I think, I would be a different person for sure if I hadn't moved out west.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I grew up out here in San Francisco actually, like in Bernal Heights or whatever. And yeah, I think back then I you could play there was no phones, right? So I would play in the street with friends or neighborhood kids and you know, only child just exploring the world and going on Muni. But yeah, I recommend anybody play on the street in San Francisco now. Kind of crazy. Um, unless that's their thing and they're able to do that. But yeah, so you talked about going to Stanford and spending time out here and the heart of Silicon Valley. Your career took off and you landed a job at Google and all that. And now you've started KAPWING, which is a startup for sure. Um, did you think like going to undergrad and getting a degree at Stanford would lead you to become a founder, or like was that just kind of a byproduct, or like how would you say that happened?
No, I would say when I graduated from school and started working at Google, I loved it. I was a product manager there, and I really enjoyed the product role, working with engineers and designers. And like I mentioned, from when I was a kid, I'd always had in the back of my head that maybe I'd like to start my own business one day because it was something my dad did and something I'd sort of seen his example, and wanted to follow his example. But yeah, coming out of school, I didn't know that that was my path. I really enjoyed working at Google. My entrepreneurial journey really started with my co-founder, who I worked with at Google for 2 years. His name is Eric, and he's super talented. He was also a product manager on my team on search. And he left to start his own company on his own. And I kind of watched his journey. He had a few false starts trying to build things and launch them, get people to use them. And eventually, when I was sort of considering new roles, both inside and outside of Google, he pitched me on leaving Google for a bit to try and start a company together to be his co-founder. And I thought at first it would just be like a temporary thing, that I would leave for, maybe I would take like unpaid leave from Google and try it out and go back to Google if it didn't work out. And yeah, I tried it. We built this very first like baby website together. I loved it. I loved being on my own, and I loved working with Eric. And so I decided to formally, hand in my badge and leave Google to work with Eric full time. So yeah, my startup journey really started with people first. It was about who do I want to work with and what kind of challenges do I want to work on. And I was ready for the next adventure. And that kind of led me to starting KAPWING.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I used to work at Google back in the day too. And I think like when I just told them I didn't want to work there anymore, like walking away from free food and free gyms and and plush environments really hard to do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. Yeah. I guess like random question, but at Google, did you have like a favorite, I guess, restaurant or like favorite, lunch place to go to in Mountain View if you were out there?
Yeah, I was out there. Well, my first year, I worked on a team that was kind of like at the periphery of the main campus, and there was a really good lunch place out there. His name I do not remember, but it was like right next. My friends would all
Yeah.
like come out there to the boonies to like have lunch at the cafeteria that was right next door to our office. And yeah, the office was really fun itself. It was right next door to the team that was working on like kid accounts, like
Oh,
basically
okay.
like kid products at Google. And their office had all these like fun like kid play areas so that they could like do user research and like talk to families and kids and stuff. And so that was funny too, because I would see it's kind of like a playground of an office.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember there was like a ball pit, I think, or a slide or something silly. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. So you become a startup founder with your friend Eric and yeah, right. Like so that's a lot different, right, from Google where you get like all those Google's a rich place, right? It's like probably the top five by market cap and you transitioned to entrepreneurship. Was that an easy transition for you? Like did you guys like start making revenue rather quickly than, or raise money sooner than later? Like how does that go down for you?
It was super different. It was a really different experience. I mean, one main difference is that when you're working on a startup, you have full ownership over your work. At Google, you're replaceable. You're just
Hmm.
small, you know, um, one small part of a giant machine. And um, when you're working on a startup, it's the opposite experience is that it's, every morning, like what you do, the ideas that you work on, the strategies that you go after are totally owned and authored by you. So that was awesome and very different. It was also scary and risky and felt really challenging. And we learned a lot really quickly. Yeah, as you mentioned, another huge difference was, well, first of all, we weren't making any money. So we went from making a Google salary to burning savings, spending out of our own savings every month. And that was very scary. And we wanted to get to a place where we could make enough money to at least pay rent as quickly as possible. Um, and that was, yeah, that just led to a very different lifestyle also that fall and winter. And then, yeah, maybe the third thing I'll mention there is just that when you're working at a big company like Google, I was working on designing and launching products. I was working on image search at the time. And when you launch products at Google, the whole world cares and tons of people come and try it out. Whereas and also you're making a ton of money just through the huge engine of search. Google was printing at the time like $80 billion a year. Whereas at a startup, you would need to build a product, but you also need to convince people to use it because no one really cares about your product at first. And also, even if you convince people to use it, you also have to convince them to pay for it and figure out how to monetize. And you have to care about all three of those things, like the monetization, the distribution, and the product, sort of at the same time. And that was a very different kind of design exercise, and just like experience and like hustle and the startup grind in comparison to Google. So I learned a ton about marketing and monetization very quickly because I had to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's such an awesome story. I think like, jumping from Alphabet to the startup stuff is so cool, and I guess like underrated, or I guess it's like, it's a common decision out here, but like you'd think like in the world, like that sounds crazy to do, right? But kudos to you. I've got some cool points that you've that I'd love to jump into before we get into like the product of KAPWING and all of that. I was reading, or I think like I saw on a website that you got Carol Dweck, who's an author from she's the author of Mindset, right? So like she was like a friend of yours and she became a mentor or something like that. Could you tell us about how that came about?
Yeah, I met Carol Dweck kind of on accident. My freshman year, I applied to be part of her freshman seminar that she led for about 15 freshmen at Stanford undergrads. So I think the only undergrad class that she teaches. And that was how I met her. She, at the time, was leading these freshman seminars because she sort of wanted to have the impact of, teaching about growth mindset to people early in their academic career. And I learned a ton from that class and ended up doing research for Carol's team as like a research assistant, undergrad research assistant. And yeah, have just been a huge proponent for growth mindset philosophy now at KAPWING, but also just generally in my life. I think I learned in the class that have a growth mindset and have always had a growth mindset in a lot of ways around like academic pursuits and skills, but there were other areas where I had more of a growth mindset or more of a fixed mindset. And I think that class sort of challenged my thinking around how you could have a fixed mindset in some areas and a growth mindset in others, and how you could really push yourself to have a growth mindset in all areas of your life. So yeah, it was a really important class to me. It was important for my academic career, and Carol Dweck, Professor Dweck, is amazing. She's wonderful.
Wow, yeah, yeah. It's just I was like, no way, that's so cool. You had worked with her, and I haven't read her book, but it's on the list, and it's definitely one that stands out for sure. I guess like aside from like, uh compared to like let's say you would just read her book versus like taking a class with her, how how different do you think that would be? Or like, like how is that? Yeah, how would you say like that that like took you to the next level, or like inspired you, whatever, in those in that context?
I mean, I think that the book it talks about, one core principle, which is basically that when you believe that your skills are malleable, when you believe that you get better at certain qualities through practice and new strategies, then you are happier and more successful in your life and in that area. So, for example, I had kind of a fixed mindset about being funny. I was like, some people are just funny and others just aren't funny, and you're either kind of one or the other, and you're sort of fixed where you are. But after that class, I was like, okay, I'm going to actually try to like practice being funny and learn more about like humor, and like try to like mimic other people that are funny and just take some risks. And I think that believing that like made me more confident, more likely to take risks, and ultimately it like made me happier and funnier. So that's just like one example of kind of like an area that I saw the fixed mindset in my own life. But yeah, I mean, versus reading the book, I think, one was, of course, I was 18 at the time. It was my first quarter of Stanford. And I was learning so much about myself and about the world. And just having that like one-on-one relationship with a professor is so valuable in terms of grounding you in the material and helping you sort of like interrogate how it
Yeah.
applies to your life and sort of like take it seriously amidst a lot of other noise. Um, and also, like I mentioned, it was also an important academic experience for me because Professor Dweck, I also ended up like working with her in her lab on some like intervention research. And that was also a really important and meaningful academic experience for me. I sort of got to see firsthand how research is done and saw how psychology research specifically happens. And I think that also kind of helped to convince me or sort of like helped me see how the growth mindset came out in practice, how it shows itself in different people. So I think I apply that now as an entrepreneur to my experience in people I'm interviewing, with my reports. Like I can see in them the growth mindset and the fixed mindset when I'm like meeting new people too.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Julia, that's such a cool like story that you have. I mean, like, I didn't like expect to really like, that's such a cool point too you bring about the being a funny person and like, trying to, you know, spark laughter and seeing yourself in that way versus like the growth way. That's so cool. I remember I did like a what's it called? Like I did stand-up comedy one time just randomly in Oakland.
So
A
cool.
friend of mine was hosting it and yeah, going on stage and just putting yourself out there, it's at risk, and I guess like you do grow from that, right? So like a lot of things become easier, right? Like or like maybe like, you don't think of yourself in the fixed way as you used to be. So that's such an epic transformation that you would think would be easy, but absolutely not, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I really, I think I was really lucky to get to go to Stanford and get to be sort of seeped in that atmosphere because I think other universities have different kinds of cultures. But, certainly Carol Dweck was really passionate about, her classroom being really a growth mindset oriented place. So, yeah, I feel really grateful for that experience. And yeah, it definitely had an impact on how I run my company now.
For sure, yeah. I'm friends with a guy who teaches at MIT. He spoke about like how Stanford like pushes students to commercialize a lot of their ideas, or maybe just, get it out there rather than hold it in. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think like, the culture there it's a lot different from other places too, but like what do you think it is that makes Stanford like so successful, or like, how would you interpret that?
I definitely think that Stanford like glamorizes and celebrates building new things. Like even in the humanities, there is like a celebration of, writers that are producing new like novels or materials or who are really like contributing to the world, sort of like prolific like creation is really celebrated at Stanford. And I think that is, awesome and really valuable. It means that unlike other schools, like things like finance or even consulting are kind of like less
Mm,
popular, I think, as
hmm.
career paths because they're not as like you don't have as much ownership over like creating something new, whereas like software engineering and entrepreneurship probably are a lot more popular because they really are in essence sort of like creating a new thing and adding it to the world. But yeah, I remember I have a friend who's a really talented writer who was an English major at Stanford, and he ran like the literary magazine for undergraduates our senior year, and even kind of like in that context, and very much like a studying authors of the past, historical authors, and doing like critical work.
Hmm.
He was also, I think, had a lot of that, felt a lot of that pressure to also be like producing new things and making the journal better and trying to start new initiatives within it and carve new paths. So I think that there's really like like I said, sort of like a prolificness that's celebrated. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily commercial in every aspect. Like
Sure.
there's definitely many people who I think express that in a non-commercial way through like nonprofits or like initiatives that they're working on or starting. But definitely like the idea of like starting up is a really like celebrated uh, value at Stanford.
No, most definitely. Yeah, shout out to your friend. I got an English degree back there or over there. And what was I gonna say? My next door neighbor growing up, he was a professor, English professor at Stanford, Josh Landy. I remember being like 15 and a junior in high school and talking to him about 1984 and trying to pretend I knew what I was talking about. So, you know,
That's great.
it's such a cool place. I think like there you're celebrated for your, I guess, your intellectual curiosity as well as, your even entrepreneurship values of like not necessarily sales, but more of like I guess like making something and showing it, right? Like rather than being, introverted about it. So it's a good thing. And yeah, I'm writing a book too, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Ne- next thing, Julia, I guess like to talk to you about was I saw that, KAPWING raised from venture capitalists and one of them being Kleiner Perkins, and all that. That's a cool story. And Village Global too, and Dwayne, I think I knew. Yeah, so like how did you guys go about funding? And I guess just maybe like I mean, if you had some cool stories from there, or like, like how the okay how that
Right.
thing happened.
Yeah. So going back to when I left Google, so in the beginning, we were bootstrapping. We didn't raise money. We actually worked on a different business idea for about 2 months when I first left Google. That didn't end up working, and we didn't really see a path forward, so we shut that down. And the second product we started working on was Kapwing. Um, and yeah, we were bootstrapping at the time, just trying to get to. We had sort of calculated we needed to make like $7,000 a month for us both to be able to pay rent and kind of
Hmm.
eat ramen, so they say, in San Francisco. And that was really our goal. So we built the first version of the website, got our first users, and started making a little bit of money about a month later. Um, and yeah, it was kind of a very slow ramp up from about, $200 the first month to like, maybe like $1,800 the second month and so on and so forth. And by June of that year, we were making about $7,500 a month in sort of like monthly recurring revenue, MRR. And at that point, we also sort of noticed that our users were, how we had grown the website was we had made these like one-off websites that just did a single video editing function. So we had one website for trimming a video. We had another one for adding subtitles. We had a website for like cropping a video. And we had one for like adding sound effects. And we would hear our users like through our little like chat bot that we had on the website asking us for to have multiple functions together. They wanted to trim their video and add text, or they wanted to, crop their video and like loop it or have it play multiple times. So we noticed that there was like a bigger problem, generally here, which is that video editing is really hard. Downloading offline video editors like iMovie or Adobe Premiere is challenging and prohibitively expensive in some cases. And we wanted to make something that was much faster, much more modern, easier to use by bringing it fully into the browser. Another element of that was that my co-founder went to middle school with Dylan Field, who's the co-founder CEO of Figma.
Oh
Figma
wow.
is a
Yeah, yeah.
like fully browser-based design suite, and because of that, we sort of had a front row seat to the rise of the web, the rise of Figma, and we were inspired by how they had really pioneered a collaborative suite in the web, on the web, and we wanted to do the same thing for video. So anyways, back to the fundraising journey. By the time we had, kind of met our goal of bootstrapping to savings, the user base was growing. We started to have this question of, do we want to raise money? And it was actually very hard for us to raise our first round. I had never raised money before. I was like I was 25, I guess, in San Francisco. I didn't know any investors really, but we just sat down and made a list of all the people that we did know who could be in any way related to venture capitalists, or they might know venture capitalists.
Hmm.
And we met with about like 85 investors or so, had some really bad pitches and apparently some decent ones. And we ended up closing our seed round about, I don't know, about 9 weeks later or so. We raised $1.7 million with Kleiner Perkins leading. So that was the kind of like short story of what the fundraising journey looked like. And yeah, I wrote on our blog a little bit about how these kinds of fundraising stories also cover up a lot of pain and rejection along the
Right.
way. So would definitely encourage any founder who's kind of like in the abyss, like struggling with thinking about fundraising, to check out our stories on our blog too about raising the seed round.
Yeah, no, kudos to you. I think like that's often like as you said, like shadowed from the success, So and plus, you probably change your diet a little, right? You go to you go to better restaurants and all that. What was your reaction like when they gave you they wired the money? Like you just like jump up and like, oh my gosh. Or like were you like, the stress stresses you out or what's the reaction from how did you feel?
I mean, I would say it wasn't like there wasn't like a one moment when I was like, okay, this is like, yay, this is happening. Like it was kind of like it was like a trickle of sort of like a lot of anxiety of like making sure that all the things came together at once. The timing it was so critical that kind of like everyone kind of like stuck with their commitments and like moved forward. And
Hmm.
and I would say sort of like finally when we had all the money in the bank, it was that was kind of a moment for us to be like, okay, like we're actually here, we're actually doing this. And at that point, we just kind of like I had been basically ignoring the business for like 2 months, and we had a ton of things on our plate, like all these customer support tickets, like all these features we needed to implement. So it was a lot of like just kind of turning back to the business, which has always been, I've always been a really tactical CEO, like really like involved with the business. So yeah, I would say it wasn't like there wasn't like a lot of respite in that year because the product was growing really quickly, which I'm happy for. Yeah, I think when we raised the Series A year later, we had more of a moment like that you just described, where there was kind of this day where it was like, wow, this is the day that everything comes together. And it was a lot easier than the seed.
Wow, yeah, no, that's a great story. I think like um you spoke about just what it's like to be a CEO, right? Like you get like the praise and all the like, the like news articles written about you, but like at the end of the day, like if the company doesn't succeed, then there's nothing to celebrate, right? But I guess to piggyback off of that, like taking the funding from seed or Series A and scaling a team, like yeah, like how would you say that whole thing like went or is going since I'm guessing that's part of what your day to day is.
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. Our business was like, we grew about 10x between that first round of funding and the Series A year later. And since then, I guess like since like beginning of 2020, we've grown another 10x. So things are good overall. I mean, we're profitable. We have a team based in San Francisco and New York. We are in a really, fast changing space. Like 2 years ago, we really like shifted the company to focus on AI and have built in, something like 15 different AI powered video creation workflows that can really speed up and automate away a lot of the work behind video editing. So, yeah, I would say, it's fast moving, it's exciting. I've learned a ton about hiring, about people management, about managing a board, and many other things along the way. And I think that it's like we were thinking about like how do we continue to evolve the product because it's an AI powered video editor, but we also want to make it a place where you can create 100 videos in one day. Like we can really
Hmm.
automate away a lot of the video creation and generation process to help marketers to make ads and make promotional videos a lot faster and easier, tell the story of their product. Yeah, I would say like now is a very like creative time in the company where we're trying to think about like how do we use all these new technologies to really like deliver on that value proposition for users.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've got to check it out. So it's just how do people sign up? Do they just go to the App Store or like, get an invite from you or like is it like sales on yeah, how's it go?
Yeah, you can just go to the website, kapwing.com, and sign up. It's a self-serve. You can try it out for free, and you can upload a video to edit it. Like if you want to translate the video or add subtitles, you can do that directly from the website. We also have the ability to create like a clone of your voice. So if you upload a video of your voice, You can use that to then create videos just from a script that sound like you're speaking. So
Oh,
both of those
cool.
are really popular. Like our transcription and translation dubbing tools are really popular for like expanding the reach of an existing video, and our like voice cloning and video generation tools are really popular for creating that new content from scratch.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I'd have to check them out. I'll give it a shot. One thing I was gonna say though, Julia, was like, you spoke about like hiring and all that. Like from an emotional standpoint, is that hard for you, or how do you deal? Maybe like, what advice would you give to somebody who's like, trying to trust people that they hire to do what they want them to do and make sure like all those things go the way that you kind of envision. Um, yeah, because I think like, you can hire somebody and like it's a bit of a difficult thing to like learn to trust people to work for you, right? Like, so how did that go for you or you guys?
Yeah, it is hard. It's definitely hard. I think that, I've learned a lot about becoming a manager since I started hiring people. And, I think a few things, I guess that would be my like tips to other founders. One is just practicing gratitude, really seeing and appreciating the work that your team is doing for you and sharing that. Positive feedback is like, as important, if not more important, than giving critical feedback in terms of promoting growth and a healthy culture. And also just be as direct as you can be, with negative feedback, avoid like people pleasing tendencies, which
Sure.
I definitely have, because, if you can be as direct as you can with your team, then you're going to give them as much information as they need to grow. And, there's all sorts of other things you could say there. I think like I've learned a lot about expressing my intention, speaking with I statements,
Hmm.
and, many other things. But yeah, I think that the trust really comes from having a strong interpersonal relationship where you can be open with each other and where you
Right.
can, be honest about what you think about the quality of their work.
Well, that's such a good answer. I think like, you don't find that answer in a book. So I'm glad to be talking to you.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think it's also, the hard part about startup, which is really different than a big company, is that you have to figure out what to do.
hmm,
And, at a big company where your business is already going and working and you know exactly what the processes are, it's more about just kind of like maintaining operations. But at a small company, you really have to build those operations, and you have to handle and manage ambiguity. So work with people that have worked at small companies or who are really proactive about taking on ambiguity, because maintaining something is not the same as starting something.
that's such a good point too. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. One thing, Julia, was I wanted to ask, like, I guess, like, as a startup founder, yourself, like, what would you say? Like, do you think like the costs or the expenses are often, I guess back in the day, like startups would have really high expenses, right? They'd claim the scale, spend all of it on marketing or hiring and all that. Like, do you think like running a startup now in 2024 versus like pre-pandemic, is it different from like,
Um,
I guess, would you say there is a difference or?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. One reason it's different is because it's harder to raise money
Right.
now with interest rates, and just where the tech industry is. And I think that is, for me, like, and I would say not every founder would say the same thing, but I have always been like really committed to building a sustainable and substantive business. Like we never hired like crazy fast. We never spent a lot of money on marketing.
Hmm.
And, I just think it depends on your business. But for us, that has been, a much better way for us to grow than trying to kind of like throw money at the wall. And yeah, I think that like it also kind of depends on the CEO. But yeah, I guess another way that it's different versus back then, I think, is that people have less willingness to try out new things now, I think, than they did back pre-pandemic. And they have a little bit more like app fatigue, and there's more like big companies that are dominating attention. So to be a successful company now, I think you need to innovate just as much in distribution as you do in product, if not more. It's more about like, how do you get your product to market rather than just how do you build a product that's useful?
So kind of more focusing on like revenue or like, profitability rather than like what's that word? Like just funding and all that, right? Because I guess like back in the day I was a venture capitalist and like yeah, the business models were kind of just focused on like top line growth. But I guess like now, like, with like what you're saying, I guess that's not really sustainable, right? Like or at least it's kind of just contingent on having to be able to prove that you've acquired hit the milestones and that you can raise future funding and kind of like you're looking at Uber or Airbnb. They yeah, like that they kind of fell along those lines, right? Like where it's like funding, 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 but now it's like maybe just distribution and sales and just lean startup operations. Like, do you think like one's easier to run than the other? And like, what are just your opinions on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like again, it just depends on the market and the product. Like some
Right.
products do just like they just spend money, they never make money, and that works for them. I think, like I mentioned, the I think what's really changed is not, I mean, yes, the profitability thing has changed in the sense that I think investors care somewhat more now about your plans to make money eventually. Um, but I guess what my point was there, like, is that people are just less willing to try out, like, like Uber and Lyft. I don't really know exactly how they distributed their products, but because I haven't really studied those two companies in particular, but my sense is that, they were able to acquire users in a much more kind of like viral loop way back then
Hmm.
than if you started a ride sharing business today. Like now, I think it's harder to get brain space from people. It's harder to get them to download an app and set up the app because you
Hmm.
already have so many apps that are crowding your phone. So I think that for example, like Cash App was like a good example of a really novel distribution strategy. They had like they innovated not so much on product but more on distribution in order to get to market. So I think that founders just they need to think about how do they tell a story, how do they leverage new channels to grow rather than just like building a useful product that even makes money. Like I think distribution is the hardest of those three pillars right now.
Wow, yeah, that's really fascinating. I think like just thinking about those two things, like how does anyone, never really thought of like innovating on a distribution process. So I love that point. I guess a couple cool things like I was doing when I researched the company in the brief time I had was you got Ukraine's president to use the product, right? Or like something like that. Could you or somebody over there like they had a watermark. I just learned about it briefly, but
Yeah.
yeah, tell me about how that happened.
Yeah, so it was totally a surprise. It wasn't like we got it, but one day we woke up and there was a video with the KAPWING watermark that was going viral on a bunch of different social platforms, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and the video was President Zelensky delivering a speech in Russian to the Russian people. And you might remember this video because a lot of people saw it. It was on kind of the eve of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And he was basically saying, we want peace, and we Ukrainians, like we want peace. And that video was translated into English with English subtitles so that English speakers could understand the content of the video and could watch it themselves. And so someone had used KAPWING to edit the video of President Zelensky so that English speakers could understand what he was saying. And yeah, I think it was just a powerful moment for us because we were like, wow, this is you know, um, it's a,
Global, right?
yeah, it's a global, but it's also, it's just the like essence of someone using KAPWING to like make peace and to spread peace in the world and using video to do that. So yeah, it was a special moment and special for our team to see the translation suite being used in that way.
No way, yeah, that's so cool. I interviewed one of my he actually taught at Stanford. He's another startup founder. He started what did he start? He started Alice Technologies and he was saying like he went to I think a construction site, it might have been Hawaii, and he saw the team using the product that he made and he was just like, "Oh, this is real." So
Yeah, totally.
um I guess a couple quick questions before we get out of here, Julia, are like what would you say has been like your favorite part of being a startup CEO or like, an entrepreneur? Because a lot of it is a stressful thing from just conversations and like, you might be thinking of, is this gonna run out of money? What do I do? Or like, all that stuff. But what's been like the favorite part of, or one of those highlights you'd love to share that, doesn't get enough credit?
I mean, I think the best part of being a startup CEO is that you have a lot of ownership and a lot of freedom. And, um, of course, you also have responsibility that comes with that in terms of making decisions and deciding where you want to go. But, um, I think it's really fun to get to make your own decisions and get to sort of control your own destiny. I think that's the best part of being a startup founder. And of course, that also means the risky side also means that if you run out of money or you make bad decisions, that you are ultimately responsible for those things. But, I really prefer that to,
Hmm.
to sort of someone else like controlling my destiny. And I think also, for me, like based on who I am, my personality, what I love to do, I have just gotten to meet so many awesome people through KAPWING. Our
Hmm.
creators that we work with, like so many amazing video creators that have championed KAPWING and spread the word about our product, and also just amazing teammates that I've gotten to work very closely with and get to build something with. Both of those are really like the joy, kind of what brings me to work every day and like really brings me joy.
No, that's awesome. I guess like one thing I want to hear from you, Julia, is like your product, it's kind of centered around social media, give or take. What are your thoughts on like viral videos and like how people get, I don't know, like what's your thought on that? Like, like just for instance, like everybody wants to be a social sensation overnight and like yeah, your product kind of helps them do that. And I guess there's other ways that that can happen as well. But like, yeah, like do you think like yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know. I think like I have a complex mind when it comes to that.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of depends on why you are like trying to get a lot of views. Um, and I think that most people they're trying to grow an audience because there's something that they care about that they want to share with the world, like a product or a service, perhaps, or maybe like a political stance, or maybe just some part of their identity that's important to them. And video is such an awesome medium for getting to share that with the world. So yeah, what do I think about like going viral? I mean, I think that I think I have lots of thoughts about that, which you can read on the KAPWING Resources Library. But I think mostly it comes down to the quality of the story that you're telling. And at the end of the day, like, would you keep making that content if no one cared, if no
Right.
one watched it, and no one else like gave you props for it? Like, would you still feel good making it and putting it out there in the world? I think that content creators are going to be successful when the answer to that is yes, when they are doing it for their own joy and their own purposes, not because, not solely for the purpose of growing an audience or like giving the people what they want. So, obviously there's a tactical and strategic element to thinking about like hooks you can use and video content and stories you can tell, et cetera, formats, which you can read all about on the KAPWING blog. But at the end of the day, it's really about the creator and their story and their passion for what they're making.
Well, yeah, I think that that could be like a whole tech ethics class, right? Just like I mean, the state of the world is it's interesting, We've never been in a world where like mobile and apps have been deciding our lives to the extent they are, It's quite crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I guess like Julia, a couple last things that we get into here before we ask you what your startup mindset is, just to get to know you a little bit better and have some fun. Like what would be the fa most favorite place that you've been to or visited?
My happy place is Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
No way.
It's just the mountains there are so epic, and um, I grew up going there as a kid. It's beautiful in the winter and the summer, and yeah, I would say like that place is really such a creative place for me. Yeah,
Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Yeah, I've got to add that to the list. You just fly there or you drive there? Like how do people get
either
there?
one. Yeah, I've done both many times. Yeah, you can drive about 14 hours from the Bay Area.
Wow. Yeah. I might need to check that out. I guess the next question, Julia, is like, do you have a favorite restaurant in SF or the Bay Area?
Oh my gosh, I'm such a foodie. I have a million favorite restaurants. Fun fact is that I am kind of like a Google Maps reviewer
Oh wow.
for no particular reason other than I just love like collecting all the places I've been. My favorite restaurant in San Francisco is Flower and Water, which is a pasta
Mission District, right?
restaurant
Yeah, yeah.
that's, yeah, in the Mission. Um, yeah, I had my 30th birthday there. It's such an awesome, amazing pasta place.
Yeah, yeah, it was ranked. I think like top Italian in like I don't know, the West Coast or something. I haven't been there though. Interesting. I
Oh,
guess
you gotta go.
I gotta go, yeah. Next question, Julia, is what would you say is I guess what's this question? What does Julia do in her free time outside of like running Kepling? Good point.
So I'm a big runner. I run just about every morning,
Hmm.
although this morning I actually didn't. But almost every day I run. I also do like a running group in San Francisco on Wednesdays. Um, I am a big reader. I love to read novels and nonfiction, but lots of books, not just startup books. And yeah, I mean, I love like building community, like bringing people together. I try to, um, you know, uh,
Nice.
yeah, bring people together to break bread and to learn from each other as often as I can.
Do you have like a favorite book or novel or author?
Oh my gosh. I think for a long time I would have said The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls.
Hmm.
Although I read it when I was younger. And yeah, this year, my favorite book of the year so far is Demon Copperhead, which is, um, yeah, an amazing book by Barbara Kingsolver.
Nice. Yeah, I'd say like what do you call that? My favorite novel was McTeague by Frank Norris.
Hmm.
He has a street in San Francisco named after him. And then there's that bar McTeague. So
Yeah, I was wondering if that was the same.
yeah, yeah, it's a cool story about this dentist who I guess that's why there's a tooth there. But yeah, it happened around there as a fictional story, but in the
That's great.
early
Well, I
90s.
just took a note so that I can read it later.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess that does it for those get to know you questions. But the second and last question we always ask the founders here are, yeah, if you could give an advice to yourself when you were 20 years old, maybe at Stanford, right? Like about what you know now and like just what would you say to yourself if you could do that? Like go back in time and all that.
I would tell myself to study computer science. I ended up doing this like interdisciplinary degree between math and computer science. And I really wish that I'd taken more computer science classes because I think I was a little scared and intimidated by just going for CS proper. And, university is just such a like great time to really like immerse yourself in the technology and to learn. So I think that's maybe like a one regret I have from Stanford is that I didn't just go all in on computer science, and that's what I would have told myself.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I mean, I think like I heard a lot of friends of mine who've gone there. It's kind of like what people say is like that's like the hardest major out there, or like one of them. Yeah, I guess like what just diving into that response, like the computer science, like what makes you say that, or like what do you think like could have what do you think that could change, I guess, or like
Um, well, I think that, yeah, like I said, I think that what was blocking me was fear and maybe some imposter syndrome. And I regret that now. Like I was fully capable and
hmm
um, I think that if I could, revisit 20-year-old myself and give myself that kind of confidence, then I would have benefited from it. So that was why I responded in that way. And
wow.
I encourage like I have 17 younger first cousins, and I have encouraged every single one of them to just at least take a computer science class when you are in school, because understanding how software works and just being able to be part of the conversation about how new technologies are built, I think is really powerful as not just as a career skill, but also just like as being part of modern culture and the modern world. So
That's dope.
yeah, that's what I would have told myself.
Really cool. Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I love that response. No, no need to unpack that anymore. Last question, Julia, is if you could articulate your personal startup mindset in your own words, what would you say it is?
My personal mindset is one, start with the people. Like everything in life, in a lot of ways, the things you'll most remember are the people you worked with and the memories that you made together. So I think starting with the people is like one aspect of my startup mindset. And another is just getting better every day, a real commitment to growth and personal growth, and also like growth of your business. You know, those changes, getting better every single day, they accumulate over time and they make you into, you know, a better entrepreneur, better person, better leader. So yeah, start with the people and get better every day.
Wow, Julia, yeah, I like that response. Anything else? Like, I guess, like before we get out of here, like, how can people use KAPWING, or if you're hiring and all that, just things you want to plug in?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would love creatives who are listening to check out Kapwing. I think it can automate a lot of the video creation headaches, especially if you're going from long form podcast or webinar content to short form content for social media. Check out Kapwing. It can really make that process faster and easier for you. And yeah, also, we have a YouTube channel that you can follow along on sort of news and up and coming product launches.
Wow, Julia, thank you, and wishing you guys more success over at KAPWING. It's been good conversation. I learned a ton. So
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Dan.